Climate. Seems like it's become the hot topic, if you'll pardon the expression. What everybody wants to know is, are we experiencing a major climate shift, or are recent record-setting observations merely hiccups along the timeline of the epoch? There are lots of opinions, but one thing is for sure. Before we can draw any meaningful conclusions, we have to compare current observations with those of the past. That's where the Climate Database Modernization program comes in. The CDMP was started 7 years ago as a project of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's a major effort to gather and digitize historic weather data and make them available to all on the World Wide Web. This year, as we celebrate NOAA's 200th year of collecting and analyzing data about our world, there is more interest than ever about our changing climate. And in turn, the work of the CDMP is more critical than ever. Today, we'd like to take you to the front lines where fascinating new data are being collected. So let's go from sweltering Washington, D.C. to a much cooler place. This is the Antarctic Marine Geology Research Facility, where researchers are carefully storing sediment cores taken from below the ocean floor of Antarctica. The truth is, we're nowhere near the South Pole. The facility is in Tallahassee, Florida, and the curator is Dr. Fred Weaver. Fred, what can sediment cores tell us about climate?
Tom, there's two main aspects of sediment cores that can give us very detailed information about climate. One is changes in the type of sediment down the core, and secondly, changes in the makeup of the microfossils in the core as you look from the surface of the sediments down into the subsurface.
How does the CDMP support what you do here?
Tom, we are a national facility here at Florida State University, and what the data that the CDMP provided to us, the digital data on X-radiographs and bottom photographs, allow scientists from all over the world to access this data for their research through the internet and by accessing our website here at Florida State.
Thanks, Fred. Now let's turn our attention from the bottom of the Earth to the upper reaches of the troposphere. I'm in Boulder, Colorado at the NOAA Earth Systems Research Laboratory. With me is research scientist Gil Campo. Gil, they tell me you're pretty good at dealing with pressure.
Well, Tom, specifically sea level pressure. What we've been doing is learning how you can take sea level pressure observations made with a barometer, and turn them into the weather map at the surface and the weather map all the way up to the jet stream level. And what we've been trying to do is see whether or not we could use those surface pressure observations to reconstruct the weather going back 100 years or more. We do that by taking observations that were digitized by CDMP and observations from around the world. And then we can recreate the weather as it happened every 6 hours for more than 100 years. And with that, we hope to be able to study how the weather varied during the 1930s Dust Bowl, for instance, during the deadliest tornado in U.S. history, which occurred in March of 1925, during severe cold air outbreaks, such as the strongest one that occurred in 1899. We'll be able to compare the weather that occurred around the turn of the 20th century with the weather that's occurring around the turn of the 21st century.
Gil, how does the CDMP impact your research?
The more observations that we get digitized, the better we'll be able to say how the weather has varied over the past 100 years and be able to have confidence in our projections of how it might vary over the next 100.
Thanks, Gil. Best of luck on your research.
Thank you.
As we've seen, NOAA goes to great lengths to gather climate information, even to outer space. I'm at NOAA's Space Weather Center, and I'm going to talk with a space weather forecaster, Larry Combs. Larry, I guess my first question is, why should we Earthlings worry about weather in space?
Well, that's a good question, Tom, because space weather can affect us as well as our Earth's weather here. If you're interested in watching your TV set, talking on a cell phone, flying in an airplane, or your power that's on or off, that can be a concern with space weather.
What does space weather have to do with airplanes?
Our airlines are very concerned with communications. That's one of the things right there. When we have solar flares, it affects the atmosphere where we communicate, especially HF communication that the airlines use. And these can cause complete radio blackouts for periods of time.
Well, Larry, why is it important that this historical data be archived by the CDMP?
Keeping track of this data, whether it's past or present, is very important in a number of ways. It helps us not only with the climatology of the activity, but it gives us indications of various patterns, cycles that can happen. We use this information to feed our models that we run, so it's very important to keep this information.
As Larry pointed out, the CDMP provides data for a variety of researchers. Let's take a look at some other historic data that are currently being digitized. At the National Archives in Washington, D.C., old fisheries logs are being preserved. These, along with Civil War maps, are housed and digitized at the National Archives. The maps give us an 1861 snapshot of the entire coastline of the United States from Delaware to Texas. Along with these records, the CDMP is also preserving the weather observations of agricultural scientist George Washington Carver, as well as rare books from NOAA's archives that include oceanographic information that was recorded as far back as 1796. You may be wondering who actually does all the day-to-day work of data entry for the CDMP. Well, a lot of it takes place here at Liaison Systems, Inc. of Beltsville, Maryland. Liaison is one of 3 contracting partners utilized by NOAA to enter mountains of historical data. These workers are benefiting from high-tech information technology jobs, while we benefit from the fruits of their labor. NOAA's other contracting partners are Source Corp of London, Kentucky, and Information Manufacturing Corporation of Rocket Center, West Virginia. How is their work progressing? In 2000, just 500,000 records were rescued. By the end of 2006, that number will have risen to over 50 million. That's millions of scans and keystrokes. Good job, folks. Before we conclude our look at this year's CDMP progress, we want to make one last stop at NOAA's National Climatic Data Center in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm with Tom Carl, Director of NOAA's National Climatic Data Center, where the vast archives of climate data are cataloged and stored. Tom, we've just seen some great examples of the CDMP at work. Help us put in perspective the importance of the CDMP for the nation and NOAA.
NOAA's Climate Data Modernization Program is so important because it's uncovering secrets of the past of climate change, variability, extreme weather and climate events that could be very important guides for us understanding how future climate will evolve.
The CDMP has been hard at work for 7 years now. What do you see as the future of the CDMP?
First started this project, there were over 200 million pages of paper that scientists could not read on computers. Today that's down to about 100 million, and we're uncovering more data not only from this country but many other countries to help us better understand environmental variations and change. Weather and climate data has been estimated to affect 1/3 of the gross national product in this country. This includes every sector of the economy, energy, transportation, water resources, you name it. Environmental data that CDMP is putting together has an important impact.
Thanks, Tom. So next time you find yourself wondering about climate trends, keep in mind the Climate Database Modernization Program. Because as our best scientific minds continue to analyze the ever-growing mass of data, they're going to come up with some very important answers for researchers, commerce, civil defense officials, agriculture, and mankind. Thanks for watching.